Do you have to be in LA to succeed? Now, this is a question that I've asked myself over and over again, and hopefully something that you should be asking yourself too as a student filmmaker or content creator, even if you're not in school. This is a question that you might have asked yourself just like me. And today, if you haven't noticed, if you're watching the video version, you might see something different. I am not in the studio. I am at home. Given the situation, as of this recording, the coronavirus is still going on. This whole pandemic is going on. And so, yeah, I'm here because I have to be. I can't even enter the studio if I wanted to. So, yeah, that's kind of crazy. But if, since I haven't done this on previous episodes, I'm just going to show you a few things that I have in the home studio, so to speak. What I'm lighting myself with, first of all, I'm filming on my phone, which is first for. Actually, I've used the phone a little bit in interviews with people, but I'm lighting myself with this amazing $40 LED light panel, which is amazing. I can link that into the description. And on the other side, I'm lighting with just a normal desk lamp. It's kind of funny. And the phone is mounted to a little Gorilla Grip. It's an off-brand Gorilla Grip. Anyway, sorry for those of you who are on the audio version of the podcast. You might also notice that my voice sounds a bit different because I'm not using the normal lavalier mic that I have. So bear with me. I know I don't have the proper equipment for this podcast and maybe even for the next few podcasts. A note on the show, I will be switching from weekly podcasts to bi-weekly podcasts. So every 2 weeks you'll get a new one. This is because I have been very busy lately and things have just been crazy as my last quarter of school approaches, and as of this recording, it's week 1 in my last quarter. So just wanted to give myself some time to enjoy this time while I can. So sorry for those of you who are looking forward to weekly episodes. That will not be happening for the time being. But I will still try and keep to 2 podcasts per month, at least every other week. So you'll get a new Film Frat edition. So thank you guys for listening to this. Sorry, it's been about a month since I last released a podcast. So this is the news. This is what's going on. And now here is my made episode of the Film Frat podcast. So as you know, I usually release 2 guest podcasts and then 1 solo podcast. So this is that solo podcast, and I hope you enjoy as we talk about LA or not LA. All right? This is episode 21 of the Film Frat podcast. Let's go.
This is the Film Fraternity Podcast, a show that's all about filmmaking in college, so you can turn your student projects into powerful portfolios. And now, here's the host of Film Frat House, Zack Szabo.
All right, before we begin with today's episode, I hope you are bearing with this whole situation going on. If you're listening to this live, if you are listening between, say, now, which is April 5th, 6th, till June or beyond, I hope you're bearing with the situation okay. It's been tough on me. And I hope that you're making this time very useful for yourself, being productive, maybe writing that script you always wanted to write or make that YouTube video you always wanted to make. Now is the time because you have plenty of it, right? Unless you are still working in, say, IT or something that still needs that day-to-day job going in. But you might be fortunate to be working from home. In that case, make yourself productive as a filmmaker. Go out and write that script, make that video, or whatever you're trying to do, really. All right, so excited to bring you another episode of the Film Frat podcast. It's been a minute, but I'm back, and I'm really excited about this one, and I hope that you'll gain something out of it. If you'd like to check out the video version of this podcast, you can do so at patreon.com/filmfrat. I have just launched that about a couple months ago now. And it's something that I'm actually trying out with the video, because I see that you guys like the video on Instagram, and I'm trying to make full-length versions. I have full-length versions already, and I kind of cut the highlights into Instagram. So if you want to listen/watch the full version, you can do so at Patreon, only on Patreon, with a $2 a month, not subscription. It's technically not a subscription, it's a donation. So given this whole situation, if you have some spare change, I know it's kind of a stretch given this whole thing, but if you'd like to support the show, you can do that for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/filmfrat. All right, and now let's talk about LA. As of now, I'm filming this in San Diego. This is where I'm going to school. And I'm fortunate to be here, but it's not LA, and there are some upsides and downsides to being outside of LA, and even inside it can be tough, depending on what you're doing. As a general statement, being in LA is great for filmmakers, and that's by far the historical and present day hotspot for all things filmmaking. And that includes both documentaries and fiction films. And I mainly talk about LA being the hub or the center of the film industry because that's just what it was, and that's where all the film distributors are, for the most part, and the production companies are all there. Universal, and the Lionsgate of Hollywood, distribution companies, they're all there, and it's a great thing if you want to get into that realm. But you don't necessarily have to if you want to succeed as a filmmaker. And this all comes down to what your goals are. It also comes down to what your definition of success is. For example, my definition of success for me as a student is to get a job after graduation that involves hands-on camera operation in the field. And to me, this means getting a job in broadcast media as a full-time job, which is what I plan on doing. I'm already applying to jobs right now in TV stations back home and elsewhere. So, and they're not even in LA. I didn't even apply at all to jobs in LA because I don't plan on being there. And you don't have to. So, you heard it here first. If you have plans on not being in LA, then know that I'm trying to do the same thing. So, don't feel like you have to move there. It's not required to be a filmmaker, or to be anything related to media, especially media. There are so many opportunities outside of LA, like the news. This is why I'm trying to get into that. Now, granted, this decision was influenced by my internship that I had last quarter, or I should say summer last year. And I really enjoyed it, and I found it really fulfilling to work with field photographers and photojournalists. And so I'm really passionate about that, and I want to get out there in the field as well and learn about that. So for me, the internship influenced my career focus, but for you it might be different. So, but that's not just my only definition of success. For me, I also want to make films on the side. So as my day job, I would be a news photographer. On the side, I would make feature-length films. Now that sounds like crazy, like impossible, but it's not impossible. Just listen to Mike Carroll's interview on episode 002 of the Film Frat podcast. He exactly did that. He is a news photographer and a filmmaker. He released actually 2 full-length feature films on Amazon, and he's making money with that, and he released 2 books. So yeah, you can do it in your spare time, even if you have a full-time job. And I know for some of you out there, it seems like I have a day job. I can't do it because I'm uninspired. I'm so tired after work and I can't get on the film because it's just way out of my reach. But just take little steps every day in the days that you do have off or the time that you do have off. Add to that script, even if it's just one sentence. Just add to that script, and you're going to make headways into that film you want to make. Anyway, that was the side thing. I have a long way to go. I don't know where I'm going with this. So, yeah, in my spare time, I want to direct feature films and sell them online. So that's my definition. That's my definition of success is the day job and the hobby, which I still want to make money from. So, with that in mind, let's go into point number 1 for this podcast, which is determining what your goals are. Okay? So the first thing is, do you want to be professional? Do you want to be considered professional full-time filmmaker? Or are you a part-time filmmaker? Let that sink in for a while. Do you want to be full-time or do you want to be part-time? Because that is a big determining factor if you want to be doing if you have to move to LA or not, is what I'm saying. No, you don't have to, but it's extremely helpful if you move to LA and you want to be full-time with your filmmaking. So it may not come right away. You may have to make several films for you to be profitable and to make money to support yourself on your films, but it is possible. So that's something. Are you a hobbyist or are you professional? Are you part-time or are you full-time, right? If you're part-time and you're doing this as a side thing like I plan to do, then you do not have to be in LA because you're not supporting yourself on your films, but it can be a revenue stream, which I'll get into later. And if your goal is to find set opportunities on a professional film set, yes, LA is the number one place to go. But there are emerging film towns out there like Atlanta, Georgia, or Vancouver, Canada, if you're in Canada. Those, it's all because of tax incentive reasons, but those towns are getting attention by the big studios in LA, so they have a lot of sets being set up there. So that's one way to go. If you're in those areas, definitely a way to go. So another thing is to consider if you want to make money with your films or not. If you want to make money, you can do that outside LA or inside. And I'll get to that later, how you can do that. What type of work do you want to do? Are you a photographer or are you a videographer? If so, if you're a photographer, what kind of photography do you want to do? If you're a videographer, what kind of video are you interested in shooting? If you're shooting fiction films and you want to direct your own fiction films, LA is a great place to be. Now, I know I'm sounding like I'm supporting being in LA for the most part. But honestly, the business is centered there. So if you do want to get talent that is experienced and you want to get attention for your fiction films, having great actors that have experience are going to be in LA for sure. And the exception to this is New York City. If you're in the New York area, that is also, if anything, close to LA. That would be the place. That's somewhat close. A couple of other questions determining what your goals are is what kind of clients do you see yourself working for? If you see yourself doing weddings, if you see yourself doing concerts and events, that is something you can definitely do outside of LA for sure. In fact, it may be much easier to get a job outside of LA in those fields because there's not as much demand, there's not as much competition, right? So anyway, those are just some of the baseline questions you should ask yourself before determining if you should be in LA or not. Point number 2. Do you want to be blockbuster or independent, as I call it? Do you want to go blockbuster or independent? No, I don't like blockbuster video, okay? That's dead. Okay, LA, it's going to be a short point. LA is the destination for blockbuster filmmaking. That's just hands down. Hands down, LA. New York City, maybe. But all the film distributors and production companies are in LA, so they primarily shoot near LA because that's just cheap and efficient for them. Because they have the setups, they have the sound stages there, okay? And again, the rival that may come close is New York. There are some others like San Francisco. Apparently, they just shot a part of the new Matrix movie there. But again, the talent comes from LA for the most part. So they just shot there because San Francisco, as you might know, is a very picturesque town. I live not too far from it. So yeah, it's understandable for bigger cities in the United States to have film crews come in, but know that they aren't all from that city. They might fly over people from LA most of the time. Anyway, so if you want to go independent, that can be done anywhere. Without a doubt, you can make your film anywhere you want. And this comes to point number 3, which is you can be successful outside LA. To answer the main question of this podcast, you can be successful outside LA. Because, again, you can make a film anywhere. It doesn't have to be in LA, of course, for you to be considered a serious filmmaker. You know, you can film somewhere in the middle of Kansas and get your film to major festivals and in the film circuits through distribution. And one such story is a film called Goodland. Goodland is the name of the film. And the student filmmaker, he was a student in Kansas, and he made a film in his hometown. And he got that film on Showtime. So that was an inspiring story. I'll link that story into the description in the show notes. That was an interview I listened to on one of my favorite film podcasts. So I strongly suggest listening to that because that was so inspiring for me. So now, getting people from your hometown is actually kind of exciting, I think, which makes the journey much more interesting and less traditional and old school as LA. So if you make your film outside of LA for a relatively low budget, you could get some significant attention depending on how well you execute your film. So it's actually kind of cool if you can pull it off the right way. Again, success is relative to what your goals are and what the story asks for. What is your story that you write asks for? And it may or may not make sense to shoot it in LA. So that's why going the independent feature length route is very, very doable outside LA, okay? And it can be very fun because you're working with people in your hometown or maybe near it who you may or may not know. You'll still get to meet new people depending on what you're doing. So it's pretty cool. Filmmaking is a very collaborative experience. It's stressful, but it can be a lot of fun if you know what you're doing. So again, to add to this point, why you can be successful outside LA, you're probably thinking, how can I make money outside LA when all the distributors are in LA? The great thing is that everything is becoming streaming and online based. So you don't have to be physically present in LA to succeed. And this is the cool thing. LA does have perks, yes, because you can literally drive up to the studio. Will they listen to you? Probably not, because you need to have clout and a name under your belt for you to get any attention from the studios. But you can still network with experienced professionals who live in LA, even if they're not the bigger names. Because likely, some people will live in LA but not be at the top of the totem pole. So, getting people who have experience can really help your film, in which case being in LA will matter to you. If that doesn't matter to you, if you like telling other people, or if you like working with people who are less experienced or are willing to learn along with you, then you can definitely make your movie anywhere. Again, it depends on who you know, or who knows you, rather. That's what I hear anyway. Anyway, as far as distribution and making money goes, distribution is all going online, as I said, with the exception of film festivals. And funny enough, the big festivals are not all located in LA. If you know, the only one maybe that's somewhat significant is Holly Shorts or something very similar. But the big name film festivals are, can you guess? Sundance, TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, Cannes in France, and South by Southwest. And those are just a few. They're all not in LA. Those big names are not in LA. So that should be an encouragement for you, that you don't need to be physically present in LA to go to those festivals. Besides, festivals are usually a temporary event anyway, so you're going to fly over and attend for a day or two or however long. And the same thing with the American film market, which actually is in Santa Monica. Yes, again, near LA, but you don't need to live there to attend. So, yeah, if you have a great film, you can bring it to the American film market and talk to distributors there who are set up. They have booths, apparently. I haven't been there personally, so don't ask me if you want to reach out on social media. Don't ask me about what AFM is like, because I do not know. But there are other people who do, so I recommend you search online for people who are experienced with AFM. Again, you don't have to live in LA to go. So can you succeed outside LA? Yes, definitely. If you have a great film, which you can make anywhere, if it gets enough attention, you can sell it at AFM or online. Online, here are the options. If you're wondering, how can I sell my movie online? Here are some ways. First of all, the easiest is probably Amazon Video Prime Video Direct, Prime Video Direct is pretty easy, but Amazon does not really pay you that much. It depends on the watch time of the film, so it also depends on your audience size. If you have enough people watching, maybe it's a good option for you. But there are a couple other ways. If you want to host your own film screenings, there are sites out there like Gather.com. That's Gather without the E. That's one way to go. And Demand.film. Both Gather and Demand.film are sites where you can set up an appointment with a theater. You can basically book a theater, but the caveat is you have to get enough people signed up for it to actually happen. So it's kind of like a Kickstarter. That's how it works. And that can be done anywhere. That's not LA based. They have connections with theaters across the country, and you can play your film wherever. It depends, again, on how many people are registered. So that's a pretty cool way to go. And lastly, as far as distribution goes, you can find distributors who are likely at AFM that serve your niche audience, who serve the genre that you're going for. Say, if you're doing a faith-based film, you can find a Christian distribution company, which are out there, by the way. You can also find companies that primarily serve low-budget indie films. You can find ones that serve environmental documentaries. There's just a bunch out there. So don't feel like you can't sell your film if you're not in LA, because you can. Just reach out. That's how you do it. But if you want to make money with your films, I don't recommend just relying on distribution, streaming revenue only. Now, you might be thinking, why? Because there are so much other opportunities. You're leaving money on the table if you're not considering these. Number one, merchandise. This means t-shirts, posters, stickers, whatever. This is something that you can pre-sell as well on Kickstarter, Indiegogo, wherever. I'm not going to get into all the options. I'm just throwing it out there. The second is ebooks or artwork related to the film. So that's something that you might be able to think about if you have some really cool artwork someone's working with you on, especially if you're doing animated film. That's a great way to make money. Ebooks, meaning someone who is important on your set, or you, the director, have a book that you want to sell, then you can advertise it along with the film. You can like bundle it together if you want. The third, I should have put this higher on the list, is bonus features. And fourth goes along with number 3, and that's DVDs and soundtracks. So you could bundle all these things together if you have a DVD, which is great. But just keep in mind that DVDs are not quite selling as much these days. Everything's becoming online based, so just be aware of that. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm going to cut it off here, but just know that you don't have to be in LA to succeed as a filmmaker. If you're like me and you're about to graduate, just know that there are options out there, even if you don't want to necessarily make a fiction film. You can do a documentary. You can also just be a videographer for an organization in your area. Just look out for those opportunities, and I'm sure you will find something that you will be fulfilled by. And as always, I hope you enjoyed. Remember to follow the Film Frat podcast on Instagram, Twitter, and wherever you get your podcasts. That might be Spotify, that might be Apple Podcasts. I have a few people who are listening through Overcast or Stitcher or Podcast Addict, which is kind of interesting. But primarily you're likely on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, in which case, if you're not following the podcast, go ahead, hit the follow button. You're going to get updates, again, every other week from now on, since I can't do the weekly deadline, unfortunately. And I really hope you gain something out of this. As always, you can find the show notes in the description and on filmfrat.com/show-notes. So thank you again for joining me, and remember that you are gifted, you are creative, and you are able. Talk to you later, guys.
That's all from this episode of the Film Fraternity Podcast. For more filmmaking tips and tricks you can use on your next project, visit www.filmfrat.com. That's FILMFRAT.com.